Venus has talked about various health scares and trying to go to an emergency room and getting the cold stare from people. But it was probably when I was about 35, because the biological clock was ticking, and Venus had already been on hormones for quite a while. Given various medical things going on with Venus, it looked like I was going to have to use a sperm donor. And so we went to a fertility specialist, and we just got a really cold reaction from this person. Now, at the time, I did not feel confident enough to advocate for myself. Finally, the nurse who was getting to know me a lot, because I was coming back so frequently, she said, the donor you're using, it's pretty old sperm. I don't think that's a good idea for you to be using. Now, why didn't the doctor tell me that? I didn't go back ever again. I just gave up on that dream. We couldn't afford, $30,000 for IVF, and it was about the same amount of money to do foreign adoption at that time.
I always knew I wanted to have kids, and families was maybe the number one value in my Jewish family. In early 1980s, some women put together a film called Choosing Children, and I saw that movie, which was about lesbians having children, and I thought, oh, this really is possible. And so I knew either I would try to have my own biological child, or my partner have a biological child, or we would adopt children. And it turns out we each had one.
I have lesbians couples all over the state tell me about how they really want to be parents, and it's so hard to find doctors who can, one, understand this process and how they go about it, and then sometimes it's just so expensive that we can't be parents. And then if we're locked out of adopting or fostering too, it's like we have all of these wonderful lesbian couples running around just being like, I want children, and then it's really expensive or almost impossible to do. I have a wonderful doctor now, so when we were talking about me possibly getting pregnant and all the ways that could happen, there's a bunch of drugs, but there's ones called Clomid, which just stimulates egg production, but most doctors won't prescribe it to lesbians.
My partner Charlie and I had been married for a little over a year when we decided to start trying to have a baby in August 2013. Technically, you're not considered infertile until you've tried to conceive for 12 months straight with no result, but 5 negative pregnancy tests in a row made us question the efficacy of our approach. First, we investigated the possibility of Charlie taking Clomid, an ovulation-stimulating drug used to treat infertility. If we could up his egg production, we might increase our odds of a successful at-home insemination. But we couldn't get anyone to prescribe Clomid. It's not safe to take if your insemination isn't being overseen by a doctor, said the nurse Charlie talked to on the phone. But if we were a straight couple, we could just take Clomid and have sex, right? Charlie argued. Well, yes, we would prescribe it for a normal couple, the nurse said. Oh. Although in some subsets of our culture, the phrases artificial insemination and lesbians go together like peanut butter and chocolate, the medical infrastructure surrounding assisted reproduction is still staunchly heteronormative. We tried to appeal the Clomid decision, but got nowhere. Every doctor we talked to agreed that, for no reason they could pinpoint, taking fertility treatment and then trying to get knocked up at home was much more dangerous for lesbians than for straight people. I wish it were more acceptable to talk about this. As queer people, we need culturally competent healthcare providers who understand and sympathize with what we're going through. Assisted reproductive technology isn't anyone's ideal way to start a family, but if it's needed, it can be an enormous blessing. I think it's worthwhile to share our stories and realize that while this issue is emotional and deeply isolating, those of us going through it are not alone. I'm tempted to end on some kind of platitude like, I know it will all be worthwhile when I finally get to hold our child, but the sad truth is that we might not succeed. Some couples don't. Some stories don't have happy endings. But that doesn't mean they don't deserve to be told.
I've known pretty much since I could think that I wanted to become a parent, that I wanted to be pregnant, I wanted to become a parent someday. And banking your sperm in a sperm bank is very expensive. But even more than that, the FDA still had rules that there has to be a 1-year quarantine for the purpose of ensuring that the person doesn't carry the HIV virus. And I just felt like that was so paternalistic, you know, like theoretically I could have sex with this person if I wanted to right now and put myself at that same risk. But because I'm involving you really for a matter of convenience on all of our sides, I have to give up a year of my life and a lot of money.
I think I'm 32, so I'm like in the prime baby making years. And I think one of the hardest pieces right now is figuring out how does that happen? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? And I always get nervous too if it's a new doctor. What if they don't support gay people and then they won't help me? It's really terrifying to walk in and not know your doctor and think that you could have a bad experience. I mean, they're like very intimately part of your life, especially when you're trying to have a baby. To think that judgment could get in the way of quality healthcare.
We talked to a nurse midwife out there about helping with the insemination, and because we were two women, in order to get an infertility diagnosis and have the insurance cover her assistance in the inseminations, we would have to pay for 6 with her and have them not work. Where if you were in a heterosexual relationship, you could go in to the doctor and say, we've been having sex for 6 months and it's not working. We're in, you know, what can you do? And then they would be able to get a, you know, infertility diagnosis and get coverage for in-clinic inseminations. But when you're queer, you gotta pay out of pocket first.